ASUS ZenBook Pro Duo 15 looks very similar in its flesh to its predecessor, but there are a lot of improvements this time around and most of them include something that we've always wanted this machine to have. Hey guys, this is Karthik here for Digit.in and today we're going to be talking about the new ASUS ZenBook Pro Duo 15 that comes with dual screens and one of them being a gorgeous 4K LED panel. And then there are some other improvements as well. Well, we're going to be talking about this laptop in detail today, but before we do that, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and also press that bell icon so that you don't miss out on any of these awesome videos. Now it's out of the way, let's get started. I'm going to jump straight into the display section this time because those dual touch screens are the main selling points of this laptop. As the name suggests, the main screen that you see here is an OLED panel that measures 15.6 inches and has a 4K resolution. The secondary display, which is also called ScreenPad, is an IPS panel. ASUS has gone with the same ultra-wide 32:10 implementation. It measures 14 inches and is half 4K, which means it's going to be just as crispy and beautiful looking as the main display. Now, both displays supports touch as well as pen input, but the main display is actually a glossy panel, whereas the bottom panel is the one that actually comes with an anti-glare coating to prevent the reflections from the main display, which actually kind of makes sense because that would be super annoying. In terms of the image quality, there's a huge difference between the two for some very obvious reasons. It's quite noticeable even by looking at the laptop with both displays turned on. The hinge mechanism for the screen pad, which was missing on the predecessor, does help a little bit, but you will still be looking at this display at an angle at all the time, so there's bound to be some issues with the viewing angles. Now, I did run our usual set of display tests on the primary display, but I skipped those on the secondary screen pad. The reason for that is, if you ask me, if you're going to buy this laptop and you're going to do some photo, video editing or some animation work, then I feel like all those primary workflows should be done on the primary display, that is the OLED one. And the secondary screen pad should be used as an extension in which you run all your background applications. So yeah, just keep that in mind and you should be fine. So the OLED panel here is bright and vivid with excellent color coverage and viewing angles. As per my testing, the display covers 100% of the sRGB and 99.5% of the DCI-P3 color space, which is more in line with what ASUS claims. That being said, the color checker analysis tells me that there's a lot of discoloration happening here, as you can see. It gave me a delta E value of 7.5, which is a lot, and even a manual color calibration couldn't entirely fix the issue. On the plus side though, the display gets adequately bright even though it's not on par with what ASUS claims, but it has great contrast ratios and inky blacks. Overall, I think this laptop has a fantastic primary OLED panel, but I'm a little skeptical about how the colors deviated from the target values, with the max delta E value being as high as 12. It means it's not the best for color sensitive work, even though both the sRGB and the DCI-P3 color space are completely covered. That being said, it's an incredible display for content consumption and even for gaming, since the colors pop and everything just looks vibrant. Moving on to the performance, I again have a lot to talk about here. So my review unit is a top spec configuration that's kitted with a 10th generation Intel Core i9-10980HK, which is a Comet Lake processor with 8 cores and 16 threads. Now, this particular processor has a base clock of 2.40 GHz and a max turbo frequency of 5.3 GHz. This is a 45 watt TDP CPU that can be configured with up to 65 watt by the OEMs, provided that the chassis and the cooling solution allows for it. For memory, you get 32 GB of DDR4 RAM running in dual channel, and you also get a 1 TB NVMe SSD with great read and write speeds. For graphics, you get an Nvidia GeForce RTX 3070 GPU with 8 GB of GDDR6 VRAM with a base TGP of 90 watts, but it can jump up to 110 watts depending on the title and the performance mode. I started off by running the Cinebench R23 to test the Core i9 CPU. I noticed that the processor did hit the 5 GHz mark, but there were a lot of fluctuation happening in the clock speeds, as you can see here in this graph. This isn't unusual on machines that throttle due to either power or temperatures, but I'm just glad that at least it delivered the results despite this behavior. The Cinebench R23 score that you see here on the screen is on par with the 2020 Zephyrus Duo. The multi-threaded performance here is lacking though when compared to the ASUS ROG Strix Scar Edition running the Ryzen 9 5900HX. I got similar results on the Cinebench R20 as well. On PC Mark 10, the ZenBook Pro Duo 15 managed to score 5931, which is actually less than the ASUS Zephyrus G15 score of 6927 that's running the Ryzen 9 5900HS. In fact, it's less than the score of the MSI Pulse GL66 laptop that we recently tested that was running the 11th generation Intel Core i7 11800H CPU. So the older CPU is definitely showing its age here. Before we move on to the creative workload section, I want to talk a little bit about the gaming performance of this laptop because I feel like a lot of people will end up running games on this powerful machine, even though it's not exactly a dedicated gaming laptop. The RTX 3070 will get you good gaming performance and the benchmark numbers are on your screen just about now. Even though it has a 4K display, I will still suggest you to play games either at 1080p or 2K resolution only. Running games at 4K will force you to tone down some graphics settings to hit that sweet 60 FPS mark. So the ASUS ZenBook Pro Duo 15 can mainly be seen as a creative-centric laptop. Those dual 4K touchscreens are great for multitasking and they open up a lot of room for your creative work or applications such as photo and video editing software. But exactly how well does it perform? Well, let's take a look. If you care about 3D Mark scores, then those results will be on your screen now. The scores here are nothing extraordinary and are pretty much what you'd expect from an RTX 3070 GPU. I started some workstation related loads with the Blender test and those numbers are displayed on your screen just about now. To test the creative workloads, I fired up Adobe Lightroom to export some RAW files and the laptop managed to export 50 RAW files in 2 minutes, 100 RAW files in 3 minutes and 45 seconds and 200 RAW files in about 7 minutes and 16 seconds. When it comes to DaVinci Resolve, the ZenBook Pro Duo managed to export the project very quickly and the result is on your screen now. It's not too bad. Overall, the ASUS ZenBook Pro Duo 15 performs just about how I expected the Core i9 and an RTX 3070 combo to perform. The laptop did manage to impress me with its high power allocations and high clock speed in longer duration loads, but there's only so much that an i9 10980 HK can do when it goes head to head with the newer CPUs on the market, so yeah, there's that. As for the thermals, I'd say that the CPU runs hotter than the RTX 3070 here in this case. The CPU was hitting its TJ max temperature of 100 degree more often than I thought. Due to this, I noticed a lot of clock speed fluctuation and thermal throttling happening. The GPU on the other hand ran surprisingly cool throughout the testing process. It was constantly under 80 degrees Celsius regardless of the load and I only saw it go past that while running games at 4K. ASUS has changed the design a little bit to add two huge vents on the side to push hot air out of the chassis. And since I was running the laptop on the performance mode throughout the testing, the fans kicked in almost immediately and they get super duper loud. But thanks to that, the surface temperatures were well under acceptable limits. And since the keyboard is shifted towards the bottom away from the internal cooling solution, I was only recording temperatures under 40 degrees Celsius on the keyboard deck. So no complaints here whatsoever. The keyboard on the ASUS ZenBook Pro Duo 15 has a standard layout with an extra set of keys on top of the click pad. The typing experience here I'd say is okayish at best. The keys have 1.4mm of key travel, but they are very similar to the rubbery keys seen on the ZenBook notebooks. Yes, they are comfortable to type on, but don't expect much from these chiclet style keys with limited key travel if you are coming from say a mechanical keyboard. One of the main issues for me is the keyboard placement on the laptop. ASUS has shifted the keyboard to the bottom of the deck to make room for the screen pad. That's understandable, but I was never a fan of this keyboard style and it hasn't changed. Do not expect to comfortably type while using the laptop on your lap or in cramped spaces. You will need a spacious desk with a palm rest to get any meaningful usage out of it. The same is the case with the touchpad as well. I can never get used to this touchpad placement and frankly speaking, I don't think I want to. It's a really bad experience, so please get yourself an external mouse. Yes, it's a great surface to use gestures and it has Windows precision drivers. It even doubles up as a numpad thanks to the white LED numpad layout that looks very similar to the white keyboard backlit color. But none of that could make me get used to it. Moving on to the port selection, I like how the ports are all distributed on both sides. But sadly, there's not enough space to accommodate a lot of them due to the huge vent that we talked about earlier. On the right side, you get two USB Type-C Thunderbolt 3 ports, a USB Type-A 3.2 Gen 1 port. Moving on to the left side, you have an HDMI 2.1 port and a 3.5mm headphone jack, along with the port to charge the laptop. Well, the thing that's actually missing here is an SD card reader, which is kind of weird considering the fact that this is a creative-centric laptop after all, and the creators are going to be using that a lot. So yeah, there's that. Anyway, let's talk about the design and the build quality now. So ASUS hasn't changed the design much from its predecessor. The design with all its angles, colors and even the materials is pretty much identical to last year's ZenBook Pro Duo 15. Even the lid has the same concentric circle texture with the ASUS logo and is still prone to fingerprints. The main difference this year is the addition of this new hinge mechanism for the secondary display. The secondary display now lifts up more as you lift the laptop's lid. The mechanism honestly looks a bit fragile. It even shows signs of flexing when you press down on the secondary display, but I can assure you that it's tough and won't break down that easily. In fact, the overall stability of the chassis is very good. By the way, the ASUS Ergo Lift mechanism is still there, which means the chassis still lifts off the ground as you open the lid. As I mentioned earlier, the ASUS has also added two more vents to the chassis for better airflow. I wouldn't say it's a compact laptop by any means, but it's slightly thinner than the predecessor. The laptop weighs almost 2.5 kgs, which means it's comparable to some beefier gaming laptops and workstations, and you should definitely consider resting it as a desktop replacement. You can't expect much from a laptop's battery when you're looking at some powerful internals like the ones that this machine packs. Not to mention, there are two 4K displays here as well. The ZenBook Pro Duo 15 OLED packs a 92 Wh battery inside, which is quite bigger than what the predecessor had. In PC Mark 10's battery life test, the laptop only managed to last for around 3 hours, which I'm honestly not surprised by. In day-to-day usage, you'll only be able to get around 4 to 5 hours of usage at max, that too when the brightness is not set to its maximum value. I suggest you to turn off the screen pad display when it's not in use to save some battery, and even switch to a dark mode and use black colored theme since this is an AMOLED panel. Your mileage will definitely vary based on what's displayed on the screen. The laptop is charged with a 240 Wh brick and there's no support for USB Type-C charging. So time for my closing thoughts on this laptop. Well, let me tell you that this is not your average 15-inch notebook, and that should be very obvious looking at the price tag of this machine coming in at upwards of 2 lakh rupees. In fact, it's close to 2.5 lakh rupees. But you are paying a premium here for the kind of engineering that's been put into this device, its high resolution dual touchscreens, that OLED panel and the powerful internals. But at the same time, it also has its fair share of compromises with respect to its weight, size and the overall practicality of using this machine. It's a fairly chunky machine for a 15-inch laptop, and some other similar spec devices like the ROG G15 that I reviewed not too long ago are fairly compact. It's also not very practical to use without a desk due to that downshifted keyboard. Not to mention, it also only has a 10th generation processor. Well, it should be enough to handle just about anything, don't get me wrong, but I would have loved to see an 11th generation processor here. So if you're looking to buy this laptop, then I would suggest to take a look at some other options as well, like the ROG Zephyrus G15 or even the ROG Zephyrus Duo, which also has 2 screens by the way. So the whole idea of having dual screens on a laptop is not exclusive to this particular machine, which by itself makes it a weird recommendation. Now that being said, I'd love to know your thoughts about this laptop, so let's take it to the comment section and have a good discussion over there. Well, that's going to do it for me in this video. I will see you guys very soon with another laptop review. Until then, stay safe and thanks for watching.